Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But if you want to stay even more up to date, definitely go ahead and check out Board Game Co's channel because he'll be putting out a video very soon going over the month of September and letting you know of all the campaigns that we know about so far. There are new campaigns being added and moved around all the time, so you'll still want to check back here. But definitely go check out his channel. He has a lot of great content, and he also does dedicated reviews and updates on the campaigns as they develop. And I normally like to start these videos by going over some new announcements and discoveries that I just found out about over the past week, but there wasn't anything that was too big that I think is worth mentioning, so I'll just get straight into the campaign. So let's see what we have this week. And the first campaign we have launches on August 29th, and this one's called Philosophy, and this is a two-player game that plays in under 30 minutes. And this is a strategy game. And the way that this game works is that each player is going to be taking turns placing tiles into the center board. And the catch here is that you're only able to set tiles into the center 9 squares. But each of the tiles you play will have a special ability unique to that tile, and this will allow you to push or pull or move other tiles around on the board, even pushing yours or your opponent's tiles off the board, which if that happens, they will go back into their supply. But a really neat aspect here is that depending on how you place the tiles, you'll actually be able to create some chain reactions, activating multiple abilities in a single turn. And the first player to get 3 tokens in a row, horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, will win the game. And if you're interested in this one, I have links in the description below. And the next campaign we have launches on August 30th, and this one's called Kinfire Chronicles Night's Fall. And this plays 1 to 4 players, it takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play, and this is a cooperative adventure game. And this is actually a campaign that I did cover in the past. I was expecting it to launch a couple weeks ago, but it got pushed off until now. So I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. And this is a quest-based RPG board game that has a campaign of over 15 different quests, and each quest is going to take you about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And the way that this game works is that players will be playing over 3 different phases. There's the adventuring phase, the battle phase, and the exploration phase. In the adventuring phase, players will make choices based on options presented on quest cards, and they'll need to accomplish something such as crossing a river or chasing down a suspect by flipping over the correct number of cards from their decks. Then players are going to be moving into the battle phase where they're going to be working together to defeat enemies on a physical battle map, and turns are going to be determined by drawing chits out of the destiny bag, with each enemy having numbered tokens that correspond with different attacks and actions. But on a player's turn, they'll be able to play action cards to do different things like deal damage to their enemies, or boost or gain special abilities for themselves or their teammates, reduce the damage that they take, move players around on the board, or even return different chits into the bag and redraw them for a different outcome. And this is a game that uses the fail forward methodology, which is something that I'm a huge fan of because it adds a lot more immersion, especially for RPG inspired games like this. And all that means is that if you lose a quest or you fail against an enemy, it's not going to end the game, it's just going to change the path forward, and you're going to run into some different outcomes depending on the player's choices and the results of what you and your team have accomplished or not accomplished. But some quests will also have the exploration phase where players can return to the city, speak to different NPCs, purchase items, and level up their decks for the following quests that come ahead. And if this one sounds like one you're interested in, I have links in the description below. And also launching on August 30th, we have PowerCore Call of Cthulhu. And this is a 2-player card combat game that takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And if you do like card combat games, I think you'll really want to take a look at this one because it is a lot different than a lot of games that I've seen. And this one has a lot of permutations with only a few decks. So it really has a lot of replayability. And the way that this game works is that there are a whole bunch of different decks that players can play with each deck representing a single elder god, as well as their followers and minions. But what players are going to do is not pick one, but pick 2 of these decks, and then you're going to be shuffling those decks together, and then you're going to be playing as the 2 gods that you've played. So there's already a whole bunch of different permutations by allowing players to decide which 2 decks they want to mix together, with each deck playing a little bit differently, and then playing even more differently depending on what you decide to mix. What's really neat and adds even more variability to this game is that every time you go to play a card, you're actually going to be putting a power core onto that card. So you're going to be also mix and matching the power cores that you've acquired with the cards that you're going to play. And the power cores are going to be represented by square tokens that have resources or actions on each side. And at the start of each of your turns, you're going to be rotating that power core on each of your active cards and then activating the effects that it has on that side. So this can do things like deal damage, heal your units, put shields up, or perform special card abilities if it rotates to an icon that is required to activate an ability on that card. So there is going to be some strategy and synergy depending on the power cores that you match with each of the cards. Then the final step of your turn, you're going to be putting another card into play and then assigning a power core to it. All the cards have different stats and abilities, and the goal of this game is to get your opponent's health down to 0. The first player to do that wins the game, and if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. And also launching on August 30th, we have Fugitive, and this plays 2 players. It takes just 5 to 20 minutes to play. And this is a 2-player game where one player is going to be playing as an agent trying to catch the criminal who's trying to escape. And the way this game works is that it uses a deck of cards that has numbers on it from 1 to 42. And the fugitive player is going to want to collect these cards and then put them down on the table face down and try to reach the number 42 before the fugitive can guess all the cards that they've played. But there are some rules the fugitive has to follow when playing a card. The first is that they can never play a card lower than a card that they've previously played. And the second is that they can only go up 3 values higher than the previous card that they played. So if they played a 30, the highest card that you can play next is a 33. But there is a way around this, and that's by burning cards. So for each card that you burn, you'll be able to play an even higher number to try and throw off your opponent and get to that 42 a lot faster. And then on the agent's turn, they'll be able to draw 2 cards from any of the decks, and this will give them some information as to the cards that the fugitive doesn't have, and they'll be able to cross those off on their pad of paper. They'll then be able to make a guess of which cards the fugitive played, and they always have to guess them in sequential order. And if you get the guess right, that card is going to be flipped upward. And you can guess multiple cards at once, but you have to guess all of them correctly in order to flip them up. So if you get any of them wrong, the fugitive can just leave all of them face down, so it is more risky to make a larger guess, but there is a larger reward. But if the agent's able to flip up all the cards before the fugitive reaches that number 42, then they win the game, otherwise the fugitive wins. And also being offered in the same campaign is Run, and this is a 2-player game that takes about 10 to 30 minutes to play, and this is a hidden movement game of cat and mouse where one player is going to be playing as a runner who's navigating a city skyline and using gadgets to try and escape, while the other player is playing the dispatcher, sending out their helicopters and patrol cars in order to hunt them down. I don't have a whole lot of info on this one, but the runner is going to be using a limited supply of movement tiles in order to escape, but every movement that they make is going to leave some clues behind. The dispatcher is going to be using these clues along with their deduction in order to deduce where the runner went. But the dispatch also has some powerful search abilities and can call for backup if things get rough. If the runner ever gets tagged twice, then the dispatch wins the game. Otherwise, the runner gets away and they win. And also launching on the 30th, we have the Fog Escape from Paradise. And this plays 1 to 6 players. It takes about 45 to 120 minutes to play. And this is also a campaign that I did cover in the past, but it got pushed back until now. So I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And this is a competitive board game where players are guardians attempting to coordinate islanders off the island into different boats before a deadly fog takes over the island, engulfing anything in its way. The different boats are all divided into different sections where only certain islanders can occupy, but all the islanders do start off on the island itself, and players are going to be drafting them at the start of the game, putting their own little ring on each islander and trying to get their islanders to the boat first before those boats get filled. After all the drafting has occurred, players are going to be taking turns spending action points to perform different movement actions, and these will allow players to move through different obstacles, or move, swap, jump, or push their islanders amongst the other islanders. A neat thing to take into consideration as you're drafting your islanders is that each of the islanders does have an icon on them which allows them to perform one of these actions at a reduced cost. So depending on which of your islanders you're moving, you may be more incentivized to perform a specific action so that you're saving your action points to perform more actions in the future. And you'll really want to keep an eye on which of your islanders are straggling behind, because after each round the fog is going to move closer and closer to the shoreline, and any of the islanders that get enveloped in that fog are going to be removed from the game. Once the fog gets to the end of the board, players will be scoring points based on how many islanders they manage to save into the boats, and the player with the most points will win the game. Also launching on August 30th, we have Almost Innocent, and this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play, and this is a cooperative story-driven deduction game where things got a little rowdy in the tavern, crimes were committed, and no one remembers exactly what happened. So the night's a little bit of a blur, and players are going to have to work together to try and remember what happened and prove their innocence because each of you are charged with a different crime. Players are going to be working together, piecing together the bits that they remember to prove their innocence by helping the other players find their clues. You're going to have to discover the victim, the crime, the evidence, the location, and the offender. And the game uses a board with a grid of icons, and on your turn you'll be able to ask a question to the other players. You're going to be asking about a specific column and row, and you can ask questions like how many of my clues are in the row, or does this row have the info that I'm after? You're going to have to use your deduction to discover which of the icons are relevant to you. You'll be jotting all this information down on your own personal player sheet, using your special abilities to your advantage whenever you can, and eventually trying to figure out what exactly happened, and if all players are able to do that, then you win the game. And the next campaign we have on the 30th is a solo game that takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play, and this one's called Weavlings in the Wild. And in this game, you're going to be starting the game out with a grid of cards. There's a few different kinds of cards in the game. There's trap cards, there's weavling cards, and there's beastie cards. You're going to be starting with a randomly placed 3x4 grid, and then randomly placing your trapper card into that grid. The trapper card represents your character, and on your turn you'll be able to perform 3 trapper actions. And the options that you have are to move to an adjacent card by swapping that card with your trapper card, or you can instead pick up a trap card that's adjacent to you. But the nice thing about this is that if there are multiple trap cards connected to each other in a continuous line, then you can pick up all of them for a single action. So you might want to do your movements accordingly in order to shuffle those cards around into the right spot and get the most out of your pickup action. And the final action you have is to use a trap card to capture a beastie and convert it into meat. You'll then move into phase 2, where you can go ahead and purchase any of the weavlings out in the grid by spending the meat that you've collected. And each weavling will net you some amount of population, and if you're able to gain 10, then you win the game. This is going to be a bit of a challenge because in the third phase, any beasties that you didn't hunt are going to now hunt the weavlings. Each of the beasties that are left over in the grid might operate a little bit differently in the way that they attack the weavlings. If any of those requirements are fulfilled, then the beastie will capture that weavling and both of them will be removed from the grid. And the population that weavling would have provided to you if you had captured it will instead count against your population. And if you ever hit -10 population, then you lose the game. And then we're going to move into the final phase of the round, which is the travel phase. During this phase, you're going to be removing all the cards of the bottom row, and those are going to get discarded, but any beasties that you discard from the row are going to be converted into wounds, and any weavlings that are removed from the bottom row are going to count against your population, moving you further into the minus, potentially costing you the game. All the cards are then moved down, and any gaps are filled by drawing from the main deck, and the game continues like this. Inside the deck are also a few event cards, and if any of those get drawn, they can have different effects and manipulate the game in different ways. But if you're able to get to a population of 10, then you win the game. But if you reach a -10, then you lose the game. Also launching on the 30th, we have Uluk, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is also going to be my own personal pick of the week. And the reason I'm picking this one is because it does share a lot of similarities with one of my favorite games of all time, which is Agricola. But the differences I'm seeing with this one I really like. It doesn't mean I'll like this one more than Agricola, but it does look like a lot of fun as well. And it definitely does play differently enough to be its own game, and I don't think everyone would be making the same correlation that I do. But just like Agricola, this is a worker placement game, and each player is going to have their own personal player board and a main player area where they're going to be placing their workers. And just like in Agricola, you do have to feed your workers at the end of each round so that you don't lose victory points. And the different worker placement spaces will allow you to collect resources like food or other resources that you can hopefully convert into food. And what makes this one interesting is that any of the resources that you collect do go onto your own personal player board, but the resources that are not directly edible and require processing will have little arrows on the player board instructing you as to how you can convert those into other resources. In each round, players will be taking turns putting their workers out on the main board, but unlike Agricola, you will be able to put multiple workers in the same location if there's space for more workers. But then similarly to Agricola, if any of the spaces aren't used, then the amount of resources there will increase. But instead of just putting more resources there and piling them up like they do in Agricola, which can get really messy, this one just uses a token that you're going to be sliding up a track. And in order to convert resources across your player board into other resources, you're going to have to put a worker in the action space to be able to do that. And whichever action space you choose will allow you to produce one type of resource. But the nice thing about this is that if you have a lot of resources that you can convert into that type, then you can convert them all at once with a single action. So you might want to time this with the resources that you've collected. And you can also place workers in order to gain special cards that grant you abilities for the rest of the game, and they can also grant you victory points as well. And then finally, there's the monuments, where players can compete to put workers in those spaces in order to gain that monument. And this will gain you victory points at the end of the game, as well as a special bonus for collecting certain resources depending on which monuments you've gained, and you'll have that ability for the rest of the game. At the end of each round, you're going to have to feed your tribe, so you're going to want to make sure that you have enough resources to do so. And then any of your extra resources, you're going to be trying to create different sets of to spend in various ways to throw celebrations that earn you victory points at the end of each round, but cost you resources. So you'll want to make sure that you have enough left over so that you're able to feed your tribe in the following rounds. The player who has the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And also launching on the 30th, we have a couple expansions for the game Space Explorers, and this is going to be for the Space Explorers Age of Ambition and the Prehistories Evolutions expansions. These are both going to be adding a few different modules that you can mix into the game however you like. If you haven't played Space Explorers before, it plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play. And in this game, you're trying to complete different space projects that require different skills. And the players will be trying to gain the different specialists to gain those skills to complete those projects. But in order to do that, you're going to be spending these tokens to purchase a skill set of the matching type. But the interesting thing here is that any of the tokens that you spend will go to the player on your left, adding to their pool and making it easier for them to buy more cards of that type in the future. But on a turn, you can choose to take a specialist from the shared market to add it to your hand, or you can spend the resources to play a card from your hand or directly from the shared market directly into your tableau. Or alternatively, you can take a card that you already have in your hand and put it back into the shared market, and in doing so will gain you 2 tokens of any type. So you might just want to take cards in order to put them back later, but any cards that you do add to your tableau does start creating a sort of engine, because the cards you have will have icons on them that make the other cards of the same type easier to add in the future, because it's going to supplement the cost of those cards. Each of the cards also have a special ability that's active as long as it's visible, but anytime you go to add a card of the same type into its row, it's going to cover the card that was previously there, covering up its ability, but the new card will grant you its new ability. But as you gain cards, you're going to be gaining the icons that come on those cards, and you're going to be using those icons in order to fulfill the different projects, and you're going to be fulfilling the projects to gain victory points and hopefully win the game. The game ends when all the projects are completed, or when a single player has 12 specialists, and in that case, the player with the most victory points wins the game. And the Age of Ambition expansion is going to add 7 new modules that you can mix and match into the game however you like, and this is going to allow you to do different things like play as different nations, each with their own special abilities, develop new breakthroughs or collaborate to create breakthroughs for victory points, add influential politicians into your deck, and these will be revealed similarly to the specialists, but they're going to be more powerful but have harsher requirements and penalties if you're not able to meet those requirements. There's also going to be crisis cards that kind of changes the way that the game plays, because the game's going to end as soon as 6 crisis cards are completed, and these are going to have some negative effects on players that stay in for a period of time, depending on the actions that the players perform. There's also gold tokens that can be added above each specialist column, and if you're able to complete the objective on that token, you're going to gain additional victory points. Then there's also talent tokens, which can just grant you more special abilities. Then there's the remarkable projectiles, and these are going to have additional conditions and be a little bit more advanced than the original tiles. These are going to be additional projects that you can try to complete. There's also the Higher Directives module, which adds an additional token to each player that they can spend to buy cards with. But this isn't going to be a new token. Instead, it's going to duplicate one of the tokens that are already part of the game. And the Prehistories expansion is also going to be adding additional modules that you can mix into the game, but I couldn't find too much info on this one, so you'll just have to check out the campaign if you want to know more, and I have links in the description below. And also launching on the 30th, we have Lion Pirates. This plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this game is a sort of extension to one of my favorite games, which is Liar's Dice. And this is going to use core concepts of that game, but it also adds a shared board where players are going to be racing to be the first around the board. You're going to be rolling your dice and trying to outwit your opponents, while also taking advantage of action cards whenever you can in order to help yourself along the way. The game plays over 3 rounds, with each round consisting of 3 phases, which is the betting, the sailing, and the action phase. During the betting phase, this is where you're going to perform your typical Liar's Dice game, where you're going to be rolling dice and then trying to guess how many dice are among all the players of a certain value. And the next player is going to have to decide if they want to call your bluff or make an even higher bet. But the way that it's designed in this game is that there will be a loser, there will be a winner, and all the other players are known as survivors. And the reason that this is important is because in the next phase, which is the sailing phase, all players except the loser will be able to sail forward on the map and battle for whatever event or tile that they land on. The spaces could be good or bad, and if you're the only one there, then the space is going to affect you. But if multiple players land on the same space, then you're going to be doing a little mini game to battle for either avoiding or taking on that space, depending if it's good or bad. After that, we move into the action phase where players can spend any cards that they have in order to get additional benefits for that round. And the thing to note here is that you can buy more action cards, but in order to do that, you're going to have to gain gold. And the way that you gain gold is being the winner of the Liar's Dice game in the first phase. The game continues like this, and then the first player to completely loop around the board wins the game. And the next campaign we have, also launching on the 30th, is called Watch Hockey, Get Drunk. And to play this game, you're going to be watching a hockey game and getting drunk. But the way that you're going to do that is by using some cards. And the way this game works is that at the start of the game, you're going to be shuffling up the deck and dealing cards to each player. And then each of the cards is going to have some sort of moment that if that ever happens in the hockey game, you can hand that to another player and issue them a drink. But there's also going to be some cards in the middle of the table, and these are going to be global cards that if any of those events happen, then all players have to drink. But then for those pesky commercials or pauses in the game, this game does offer intermission cards, and these are going to offer either mini games or trivia that players can try to attempt. And of course, this will probably result in more drinking. And the game continues like this until the hockey game is over, until you're too drunk to continue, and all players win the game. And now for games launching on September 1st, we have Waking Shards. And this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 20 to 25 minutes to play. And this is a card combat dueling game. And the main mode in this game is going to be a 1v1 duel, but it also offers a free-for-all mode as well as a team game mode. And in this game, you're going to be shuffling up a deck of cards. Then each player is going to be drawing 4 at the start of each round and then discarding 1. And then players are going to be taking turns playing their cards until they have no more cards in their hand. But cards will each have a strength and an ability, and the ability can do different things like gain you more cards, play additional cards, or break turn order, or even harm the other players. But there is one special type of card called the Shard card, and if you play that card, you'll be able to use its abilities each of your following turns. But the catch here is that each of the cards has a strength value except for the Shard cards. So those ones might give you special abilities, but they're not going to be adding to your strength. And in order to win each round, you want to be the player that has the most strength. And this is going to create a fun decision point where you're going to decide, do you want more abilities that can help you throughout the game, or more strength that can help you secure victory points right now? And you might try to make that decision a little bit differently depending on how much strength you actually get in your 4 cards and the options that are available to you. At the end of the round, all your cards are going to be shuffled back into the main deck, except for your Shard cards. Those are going to remain in play for the rest of the game. And the game continues like this until someone wins 3 rounds and they're going to win the game. And if this one sounds interesting to you, I have links to the campaign page in the description below. And then also launching sometime this week, but I don't know when exactly because they don't have a countdown on the page. But it does say in their comments that this will be launching this week, so we can expect it to go up on GameFound. And this is the next game being offered by Queen Games, and this one's called Powerline. And this one is all about creating a green planet. In this game, each round you're going to be rolling a set of dice and then putting them out on a shared board. Each player is going to decide for their own personal player board, do they want to activate those dice from left to right, or from right to left, and then you're going to be performing the actions that are available to you from those dice. You're going to be trying to complete different power lines in order to score victory points from cities and power plants, and you're going to be trying to complete mid-game objectives for additional points. And players will only be able to use a certain number of dice only a certain number of times, so you're going to want to be cautious with the dice that you activate, but you can only skip using a die by taking a penalty. So this is something that players are going to have to factor in throughout the game, and the player who has the most victory points at the end of the game wins. Those are all the campaigns we have for this week, but don't leave yet because we have an awesome giveaway to announce, and this one is for Trailblazers, and this is a pocket-sized game that also comes with a travel case, and this is a game all about creating different types of trails, and you're going to be creating either a hiking trail, a biking trail, or a kayaking route. And the way that this game works is that each player is going to be starting with a camp for each of the 3 types of trails. And then each round you're going to be choosing 2 cards from your hand in order to put down around one of those campsites in order to create a trail. The game plays over 4 rounds, with each round having you put down one of your 3 campsites, which means the 4th round you won't have any campsites left to put down, and in that case you're just trying to place down additional trails. After each round, you're passing all the cards in your hand to the player on your left, so you're going to want to be cautious of which cards you're not picking because those are going to be accessible to the next player. The game also comes with additional modules to allow you to add animals and adventures into the game, and players will be gaining victory points for each of the loops that they complete, as well as different objective cards that they're able to complete throughout the game and at the end of the game. And this giveaway is going to be for the Super Travel Edition, which is going to come with a clamshell case and carabiner, as well as waterproof PVC cards. This is going to make it nearly indestructible and make it really easy to take out on the go or take it camping or wherever you are traveling. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag trail and let us know which you would prefer, hiking, biking, or kayaking. For myself, I used to mountain bike quite a bit and I still do hike a lot, but I think kayaking is probably my favorite. Mountain biking, I just injured myself way too much, and then hiking is nice, but it's just not quite as exciting as kayaking. And I do enjoy hitting a little bit of the white water, which is also a good way to injure myself, but hasn't happened yet. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week. Good luck in the giveaway, and as always, thanks so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
What?